Pop-O-Holics, show about hot takes other than hot, tasty pancakes. We're a couple boys, happy as can be, talking about Marvel's new movie, Shang-Chi. I am your host, Christian Katy, and I'm joined, as always, by my friends, my best friends.
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree.
I did it again. I'm so sorry. And as always, we're just rolling with it. And not as always, as sometimes we have the pleasure of our friend. You may know him as the mogul, the media mogul behind Careful for Spoilers Network with his new show, Careful for Spoilers Villains and Anime Lately. We're joined by the magnificent, awesome Mr. James Barnes.
So happy to be here, guys, and of course it's for Shang-Chi. Happy to be back for yet another Marvel movie so we can talk about its greatness for what it is.
I just want to shout out. Yep, go for it. Go for it,
Brian,
Chris.
are you going to do it or am I going to do it?
You do it. We're on the same page.
You started it. I want you to do it. You do it.
So we do our Throwback Thursday episodes, and tomorrow, as of this release, we're re-releasing on YouTube our Endgame episode, where you guessed it, way early on in the podcast. So perfect timing for you to be on this week.
But yeah, James is going to be on two Pop-O-Holics episodes, one from 2019 and one from 2021, all in the same week. We're time travelers, boys.
Friendship, it's a beautiful thing, and a movie that's based on time travel. It's perfect. It's just absolutely perfect. But we're not in the end game anymore. We're post the end game. We are in phase 4, having these movies rolling right along. I will try to keep up. I'm very exhausted, and as you can hear, my horse is very throat. What are we doing? We're talking about Marvel's Shang-Chi.
Throughout my life, the 10 rings gave our family power. If you want them to be yours one day, you have to show me you are strong enough to carry them.
You are a product of all who came before you. The legacy of your family. You are your mother. And whether you like it or not, you are also your father.
I told my men they wouldn't be able to kill you if they tried. Glad I was right.
That is from the trailer of Marvel's Shang-Chi. And Legend of the Ten Rings. Can't forget that. It was directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. Written by Destin Daniel Cretton. David Callaham and Andrew Lanham? Scored by Joel P. West, with a budget of, not disclosed as of this recording. As of this recording, it's grossed $53 million on. It's pretty much, we are, halfway through the opening weekend. But it looks like it's on track to do pretty good numbers. Obviously, with where COVID cases are, it's definitely an adjusted kind of take we should have on how much it's grossing.
I will say that's true for Marvel movies in general, but for Labor Day, this is actually outperforming even pre-COVID numbers back to like 2006. I think I read potentially if it does end up making this 80 million approximately, but it's just under Black Widow.
This weekend.
Interesting, really good insight. Yeah, it's definitely it's weighted. It's extra weighted. It stars Simu Liu as Stars Simu Liu as Shang. The way that it's written in the cast notes is not how.
I'm sorry, I put the family name first. That's how it was on
Disregard
Wiki.
The family name.
That makes sense.
Shang-Chi.
Zhu
What you're
Shang-Chi.
supposed to do.
Yeah, Shu Shang-Chi. It stars Awkwafina, Meng'er Zhang, Fala Chen, Florian Munteanu, Benedict Wong, Yeoh, Tony Leung, Ben Kingsley, and Ronny Chieng. And what are we going to be talking about? Well, we're going to be talking about our experience with Kung Fu films. We talked a little bit about it with our Enter the Dragon episode as we theme our months and we talk about different stuff. We're doing all Kung Fu movies in honor of this release. So we want to get James and our history with Kung Fu, and then our non-spoiler thoughts. We'll then have a very obvious spoiler bumper as we go into talk about favorite moments. I have a rant about trees and electric vehicles that hopefully won't take up too much of the episode. We're going to compare it against the other MCU and have final thoughts. Sound like a plan, boys?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, can't wait.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Let's not karate chop. Let's kung fu kick our way into our opinions. But first, James, you're a special guest. What is your history with kung fu films?
I absolutely love kung fu films. I love martial arts films in general. There's just something about brilliantly choreographed fight sequences that just gets me out of bed in the morning, man. Like John Wick is one of my favorite films of all time, just looking at how well crafted those fight sequences are. So when we're talking about
we
kung
made
fu
this
movies,
distinction in our group chat. I don't know if we said it out loud, but that's technically gun fu.
sure, yeah.
It's a derivative
It's not on my
art.
list though. It's not on my list.
Okay.
But kung fu movies, absolutely love them. I mean, of course, how can you not talk about Bruce Lee, right? Enter the Dragon, any Bruce Lee movie, just pick one, right? Like The Raid, another one of my favorite movies. Ip Man, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, The Savage Five, which is a really cool Japanese martial arts film. 13 Assassins. There's so many martial arts films that I can name. So yeah, I have a huge history with kung fu movies. Absolutely love them.
Very cool. Yeah, you mentioned The Raid. I didn't even think about that in the last episode. That movie's tight. That's The Raid and The Raid Redemption are like some of the best action.
And Old Boy too.
And heavily influenced.
Yeah.
Well, Old Boy is a different story. Old Boy is really weird. People love it, and I'm glad people love it. It's a very strange movie. But The Raid, really, it's interesting that you mentioned that because that heavily influenced the Russo brothers, who directed, Civil War and The Winter Soldier, which heavily influenced like the hand-to-hand combat in the MCU, which I really enjoyed. So it's cool to see it kind of come full circle and kind of have something that can actually honor the genre. Chris, your history with kung fu movies?
I gave my history last week, but as I said last week, I'm by no means a master when it comes to kung fu movies. I'm more of a student. I've enjoyed them my entire life growing up. I was a big fan of Jackie Chan in the 90s. Rush Hour, Rush Hour 2, mostly Western releases when it comes to kung fu movies. Even Enter the Dragon, that's technically, as we spoke about last week, Bruce Lee's first Hollywood debut in the West. So yeah, most of my experience with kung fu movies comes from whatever has been made in the West with kung fu actors. But yeah, I absolutely love these movies. I mean, Christian, last week you mentioned that you were a fan of Dragon Ball growing up, as was I. So my love for anime kind of stems from kung fu.
Very cool. Brian.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I was appropriately corrected last week in terms of most of the stuff I grew up watching was very much kung fu influenced, but not necessarily kung fu movies themselves.
You had mentioned the famous kung fu movie, The Three Ninjas.
Well, I
Kid.
listed the caveat that these are not okay. Yeah, no, it's fair, but yeah, I really didn't get into kung fu proper movies until really like college or more recently in the last couple of years in any serious capacity.
Yeah, I would definitely admit to being a noob as well. This is definitely not our forte. But like we had discussed last week, seen a lot of Jackie Chan, love a lot of what it influenced in the West, especially with things like The Matrix, John Wick, like you said, the more gun fu stuff. But yeah, it lives on as a tried and true great art form that incorporates, it's like man dancing when it comes down to it. When you're watching it, you're watching men and women. I mean, women participate. But it's kind of, I don't want to genderfy the art of fighting, but it is this like more masculine, offensive, right, dance that you're watching on screen. And it reminds me of like, from studying theater, musical theater and stuff, like there's nothing different between choreographed fighting and choreographed dance. And so it's a really interesting way to engage with that level of artistry. And it's really cool. So in going into Shang-Chi, definitely a lot of like thoughts. It's the first, it's the first of a lot of things. It's the first like primarily Asian focused characters in the MCU. We're like 35 movies in, and it took like 23 movies to get like the first like major black cast Marvel movie, and it only took 30 to get to Chinese. So that's great, or to get to like Asian. So we're here. We're finally here. So there's a lot riding on it that I don't think it deserves to have. as far as like expectations for what it's going to be. And it's obviously in the midst of all these delays, and we just got the No Way Home trailer that popped in. So a lot of expectations on this flick, and a lot of things surrounding it. How did we think it landed? No spoilers. James, your special guest. Start with you.
Yeah, no spoilers. I really, really, really liked Shang-Chi. Like, I think the cinematography is really good. I know we're going to talk about this, Christian, but I think the cinematography is really good. Bill Pope did the cinematography for this film. He did the cinematography for the Matrix movies, for Raimi Spider-Man 2, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And I just love how how he plays around in these fantastical universes. So I really like the cinematography in this film. It's in the trailer, but the first fight in the movie from the forest, I will get into who those characters are, but that first fight, I just thought it was so beautiful and instantly took me back to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, in just how it was shot, the fight choreography. Absolutely love the cinematography. Like I just mentioned, the fight sequences, absolutely incredible, and we'll get into those when we get into the spoiler portion. I think the performances are pretty good. Simu Liu, I think he's good as Shang-Chi. Awkwafina was one of the bigger standouts for me. I think she does really good with like emotional beats and stuff like that, and being the friend to Shang-Chi that he needs, right? I thought the musical elements were good as well. I felt like it was well placed throughout the entire film, kept the momentum up. And like I said on Twitter, this film is rooted in family, friendship, and responsibility. It has a lot to do with the sins of the father. And then what do you do with those decisions? Do you let it rule your life, or do you change it and become the man that you need to be, right? And running away from those responsibilities. And we'll get into a lot of that stuff when we get into spoilers. But yeah, I had a blast with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. There's only two minor things that bugged me. I felt like it felt a little bit too long in certain points, and it's because of the reintroduction of a certain character that I am not a fan of at all. And we'll get into that in the spoiler portion as well. But yeah,
James,
absolutely.
I can't wait to talk about this, because they like retconned one of your. They kind of like tried to retcon one of your nitpicks from
He's
previous.
involved.
That's very, very awesome.
Let's say very little about it.
When it happened, I immediately thought of you. You were the first person to pop in my head, and I'm like,
Me too.
I don't love this, and I don't think this is going to satisfy my friend James. So, hey, we're on the
I
same
was
page.
furious, bro. I was furious.
All right, thank you for sharing. I'm James. I'm going to agree with a lot of your points. Okay, so just a heads up. I think everything you said is perfectly valid. Chris, what about you? Are the staple Pop-O-Holics MCU defender, the action boy himself? How much did you love it? Is really what I'm asking.
So before I give my answer, I want to say this, and that is one of the things that I really appreciate about the MCU is how they're capable of taking a multitude of genres and then making them accessible for your general audience, right? After seeing this movie, I'm beginning to realize that the MCU is kind of all of these genres light, right? Like you have your political thrillers, you have your heist movies, you have your space operas, and they're great kind of appetizers of what these genres can be outside of this franchise. And I think because the MCU is so accessible, it's a great entry point for people to watch a movie that they think they may have never wanted to watch, find out that they really enjoy what they're seeing, and then maybe lead them to explore that genre outside of a giant franchise like the MCU. And with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, I think this is Marvel's attempt to basically make a wuxia movie, which is like a fantasy Chinese hero in the vein of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Jet Li's Hero, like these more mythological kung fu type movies that might not be accessible to everybody, but I think Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings makes it very palatable for general audiences to go in and experience this type of movie. And because of that, I fucking love this movie. I think it was visually stunning. I think the fight choreography in the film was absolutely top notch, and that makes sense considering the stunt choreographer. worked on many Jackie Chan films in the 90s. I believe his name was Brad Allen, if I'm remembering correctly. He recently passed, so rest in peace. It's very sad. But his dedication to the art form is very visible in this film, and I can appreciate that. I also think that Simu Liu is super charismatic and is absolutely a perfect MCU leading man. And then Tony Leung is not a villain in this movie, but instead a very sympathetic character and father figure. In my tweet, and I believe
I would say he's still the villain of this movie, right?
He's an antagonist. He's an antagonist. I'll say that he's an antagonist.
He's a sympathetic villain.
He's a sympathetic villain. He's done terrible things, but he's certainly a sympathetic villain, without a doubt. And those types of villains in the MCU, while they do exist in characters like Thanos and Killmonger and even Loki, they're kind of few and far between, considering how many MCU movies we've gotten and how many sympathetic villains we've gotten in those movies. So I'm happy to say that I think Tony Leung as Wenwu joins that roster of very well-written and sympathetic villains in the MCU. But yeah, I absolutely had a blast with this movie. I really do want to see it again as soon as possible. I don't think I'll be seeing it again in theaters. I'm going to wait either on digital or Disney Plus. Seeing it once in theaters was enough of a gamble for my wife and I. But that doesn't mean I don't love this movie. I thought it was one of the better MCU origin movies.
Yeah, I agree with that last statement. I would say that I think you're hitting a lot of really valid points when you're talking about how they're experimenting in genres and making it palatable for audiences. I think that my pushback is that that's not giving audiences enough credit. Like, you don't want it to be too Chinese mythical. Like, you know what I mean? I think
I'm not saying that this movie isn't. This movie goes all the way in terms of fantasy. I'll say before we get into spoilers.
Yeah, it's just that, you know, it's accessible because it's a Marvel movie and because they've just nailed down characters that you instantly like. They're really good at just developing characters really quick, making the emotional content, making the stuff about what's happening, no matter what it is. It could be a talking raccoon or a mythical, you know, creature or something like that. And they're still able to convey that sense of Marveldom. And I think that's core to it. I don't know if, you know, what it does is make people interested in the actual source material because they tease for all their Marvel stuff. Like, it doesn't seem, it's definitely influenced by it, but I don't know, giving them like the credit of motivation to share the genre with the world. No, they're like, let's take these ideas and make a piece of entertainment. But
I will say on this point, the fact that we get the amount of subtitle use that we do, obviously there's a lot of English in this movie, but this is something that is kind of a first time thing, I think, in the MCU. So I think there is something to be said for speaking in the native language as much as is done here.
Yeah,
I mean, impressed with that.
But that's like, to me, that's
it's a bare minimum. Yeah, I get you.
That's why I don't like giving credit to, like, they actually had them speak in Chinese in the Chinese ancient movie. It's like, yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't like giving kudos for shit that should just be expected. But
let me push back. Let me push back there, because when it comes to this, and when there's an absence of something like people speaking their native tongue as they should in movies like this, credit should be given to those that are willing to push back against that and start the change. So I don't think it's fair to not give Marvel credit when there's an entire industry of people that have been neglecting this aspect of filmmaking, when there's a studio that is finally willing to say, no one else is doing it. We're at least, and Brian, I agree with you that it's kind of like the bare minimum, you know, but I think they should still be given credit in that they're willing to do that and hopefully start.
Finally, a studio standing up and being like, hey, we don't care. We don't care that there's Chinese honoring of Chinese like nationality and people in this. Like, finally, it's crazy. Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a fucking gamble.
Bong Joon-ho is quoted at some point as talking about like all the movies Americans don't watch because they don't read subtitles, and I think there's something to that. So, Christian, your point is very valid.
I know people
but
that
at least
haven't
it's finally happening here.
I know people that haven't seen Parasite because they just don't want to read subtitles. You know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of in the middle of you guys.
That's unfortunate.
I'm kind of in the middle of you guys because it's like, yeah, they should get the credit because a lot of films don't do that, right? There's a lot of films that use Asian actors and actresses in films just so that they can get the buzz from the international box office, but they don't actually do these characters justice. They might say one or two words in Japanese or Chinese, and that's it. That's them pandering, right? Like I can think of Transformers or The Meg, right? They just say one or two words in Chinese and that's it. But to have full sequences, there should be some type of praise for that, because other films just ignore it. It's like, well, we have them in the movie, be grateful.
And
Like
on top of
the
this,
entire opening sequence for this film, probably 15 to 20 minutes, is all in Mandarin, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
yeah, and
Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, on top of that, we also in English segments get discussions about, and it's not super deep discussions, but discussions about changing your name and kind of this cultural assimilation that is forced upon people who immigrate to the country or are born to non-native parents. So yeah, I think there is there's credit to be given here, but yeah, all these
I'm
points
not
are valid.
disagreeing that it's a net positive thing. It's just like especially when we get into spoilers, there is some aspects, and I guess I'll just roll into my opinions, and then Brian, I'll let you share if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I mostly agree with all the positive things you said, and I want to come across that I'm going to say the most negative things here on the podcast, and I want to be very clear. I really like this movie. I like it way more than any of the Spider-Man movies. I like it way more than half of the stuff that's come out in the back half of the MCU. Despite listen to all of our MCU coverage, and you'll hear my opinions. This is an excellent movie. What I find let me just listen down. Characters are great, like you said. Action packed. Simu Liu is incredible. He's awesome. He completely convinces in this role that he's charming. He's very, very athletic. He's doing a lot of his stunts. Very admirable. It's so awesome. You have a legendary Tony Leung in here that it's just like, come on, just like masterclass of what's happening. It's so. It's from a performance standpoint, and then Awkwafina, super funny. All the character stuff Marvel's known for is so good. It has one of the and I think honestly it's a little, it kind of hurts me because it's a little front loaded, but it has one of the best action set pieces in a Marvel movie, hands down. I'll fight anyone on this. And it's so good, and it's something that has been missing from especially like Black Widow. So when I talked about the action in Black Widow being very disappointing, this is what I mean by like raising the bar, competing actually with things like the Raid Redemption and what the best of the MCU and like Winter Soldier, of like really thought out. How did they do that? You're watching going, that's crazy. Like, oh my goodness, innovative thing after innovative thing. Like, yeah. Oh my goodness. Like it's so rewarding. And again, the character stuff is there. I love the story. Like you said, it's a little bloated, with some of the family history and stuff, but I think it means so much, and it really makes the last act work. I'm overall just like such a fan of this film. I can't wait to watch it again. But like the problem with MCU is that it literally caps its own face. For some reason, they were able to escape it a little bit in like their final chapters. Like they really were like, we'll push it a little more, which I think really culminated into this really excellent thing. But it's like there is this unnecessary commercialization that occurs. There's an unnecessary level of just Marvel that's just put on some of the shit that happens in this movie, that it's like, oh my God, you're so close to like, oh my God, you're top 10. You're so close to like one of my favorite movies. You're so close. But then this shit, the Marvel sheen, and it's like, and you're right. What's sad is like this director making a Shang-Chi movie, not a part of the MCU, would have been better. It would have been better. And I mean that. Would it have ever gotten made? Fuck no. It would never have gotten made unless it was made for the MCU. And that's what's frustrating. And that's just an artistic perspective thing of this movie is held back from being a classic. This movie will not be a classic. It won't be a classic. In the history of this world, this movie may be forgotten. Maybe, oh, remember the MCU as a thing? Shang-Chi was good, right? Remember that? And that's so fucked up to these actors and to the director and to everyone, because it has to be part of the MCU. And I like Marvel. I like Marvel shit. But damn, like it's frustrating. And I love this movie. I do. It's just like I came out of it going like, I wish I could just like love this movie and sing its praises, but there's so much other shit going on with it that It's frustrating, and it's weird that I'm like ranting and raving over a movie that I absolutely loved, and I don't know where I'm at. I don't know how I feel. Maybe this is on me. Maybe there's something happening over here on this side of the fence.
No, I mean, like this is your passion, man. Like this is what you do. You talk about movies, and you can't just look at a thing and just gloss over the things that bug you. You know what I mean? Like you have to look at it straight in the face. Like, yeah, this wasn't as good as I thought it could be, and this movie had the potential to be greatness, but because of things that the MCU does, and I agree with you, and we're going to talk about some of these points, but some of the things that the MCU just has to push into their movies keeps it from getting to greatness. I could agree with you completely.
Yeah, so
I can't wait to get into spoilers so we can hear specifically.
Yeah, of course.
Because Brian and I know of a couple things, but I'm very interested to hear specifically what you had problems with in this film.
Absolutely. But again, to cap it off, I think everybody that made this movie is awesome, and kudos to you. I loved it. Can't wait to watch it again. CG stuff is like, it's there, and that's part of the artistic cinematography direction, which we'll talk specifically about certain scenes that just make it a little inconsistent. But I actually really like the third act. It's very CG heavy, but it's beautiful. Like, and I think that's the place for it. So I'm overall like, I love this movie. I do. So I want to make sure we're ending and landing on nothing but love for what this flick is. So yeah, Brian, what did you think?
You guys have pretty much said it all. I mean, the fight choreography is up there with some of the best stuff in the MCU at times. I think the movie, the front half of the movie is the more solid half for me, and it falls off a little bit in the back end. But with that being said, I think the emotional stuff that needed to worked in the end. And I don't want to get into the specifics of what that is, but Chris, to your point, I think this is definitely a sympathetic and understandable villain who is perfect for this origin story. And James, I'm going to disagree. The way this movie ties in to the two former MCU movies was one of my favorite elements, even though it can seem a bit shoehorned and retcon-y, but I was completely there for it. And the fact that it's kind of self-aware about itself, I always appreciate that kind of like meta commentary on things. All the performances are super solid. It's very funny. And yeah, it's super solid watch. We've said it all.
Brian, to your point, because I want to bolster your point and piggyback off of that. I agree with you as well. I think this movie has the perfect amount of MCU material sprinkled into it. There are way more MCU movies that are much more egregious when it comes to making themselves a part of the universe and setting up future things. But I think this had the perfect amount of like, oh, we do exist within this world, but like we really are doing our own contained thing here. And there is something we're going to talk about, but I feel like it had to be brought up in this movie because of what has happened previously in the MCU. And I don't view that as a negative thing. I feel as though the retcon, if we're going to say it, and we're dancing around it here, made it better. Made that
we may have pseudo spoiled it in the opening, and it's my fault. I'll take credit.
It's not really. It's barely a retcon.
Chris will bleep it. I'll show you. I'll throw you a bleep sound.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll talk about
it. Yeah. Chris, I actually, it's a good MCU movie. Like I actually, we'll talk about it. The MCU-ness of it, which is kind of counterintuitive to the point I'm making. I'll make my point broader as we get into spoilers. I actually, just to close on this, the way it fits in, I don't really have that big of a problem with, and I'm excited it's a part of it. And I'm excited that we have Shang-Chi joining and Awkwafina's character, Katy. So funny that out of everybody's names, her name is Katy, which is played up for laughs. But I'm happy they're a part of the MCU now. I am. I genuinely am. We'll get into overall thoughts. So what are those thoughts? Let's dive in a little deeper with spoilers. All right, first off, I got to get this out of the way. There is a 20-minute car commercial that just happens in the middle of this kung fu mystical movie. And it needs to be said, this movie shouldn't have a car commercial. And it's everything I hate about movies in 2020, in the late aughts, and Marvel is just like Fast and Furious. I'm okay if cars are sponsoring the Fast and Furious because it's a car movie and like they need cars and it fits in. We need cool cars. Give us your cool car. We'll show off your cool car in our cool car movie. I'm in Shang-Chi and I've got a German electric vehicle just all over the place in a CG.
Which is owned by a Ukrainian character.
Yeah, it's and it like it, you know, it's this moment where they're driving through this summates a lot of the props. Just this scene is that they're driving through this moving mythical forest, and if you explain it, it is very cultured. It's very ancient and mystical. The concept is amazing. It's a maze that's happening in real time with trees moving. It's beautiful.
Okay.
It's poetry.
I was interested because conceptually I really liked it as well.
100%. And it's like, all right, let's think about it. How are we gonna bring this to life? 100% computer generated graphics is what we're gonna do, and it's just a sea of green with this car plopped into it. And there's no drama, no tension. What makes it even bearable is that like the characters are having fun and talking jokes, and you got the cutesy animal that looks really good. That should be CG'd. It's a butt-faced bear dog, okay, with wings.
It's a chicken pig.
CG that. That's fine. You know, your CG's great. It looked great. The hair, the fuzzy, it's like a great look. I'm not comparing the CG butt dog that with wings to anything, because I've never in the real world seen a butt dog with wings. You know what I have seen a lot of? Trees. I've seen a ton of trees. You know what we have in the real world? Trees. We have a ton of them. There should be more, in my opinion. And the way they conceptualize, how do we do this? It was just CG. That's all they said. That's it. We'll make it work. And they're literally in the worst soundstage car. We talked about the fight scene on the train, which is fucking epic and amazing. And in the same movie, they'd spent 4 weeks making this shit happen. And it was worth it. It's the best part of the movie. Your hard work is worth it. What'd we do for it was 3 months of a bunch of fucking Mac Pros baking in a basement and a day on set in a sound stage, and it shows. And I don't think the director wanted to do this. Clearly, the vision behind this film did not conceptualize this idea. It's a fucking EV car commercial, and it... And then it ruins the magic because you're like, is a stupid car commercial? I'm just seeing just seeing computer. I'm not going, how did they do that? Oh my God, wonder. I'm going, it just looks like shit. And it's a car commercial. And then it gets to it and it's supposed to be this magical human moment. Like it serves a purpose. They're transported in another dimension. And what this car
It is a pretty preposterous, come through a portal moment.
They try to like save a little face by putting a dumb sticker on it to like add some humor to the moment and not make it just the beautiful car. Like they thought we can't just put a perfectly clean BMW EV car. Like,
look, Christian, the people of Talo may have ancient mystical powers, but they can appreciate a good EV as well.
They do call it a car. They say car when they reference it.
Okay,
Christian, let me say this, Christian. I can appreciate how passionate you are about this, and you know, fans of the show know that we, Christian especially, deep dive into special effects for the films, and like really do point out when we don't think special effects are working really well. And I can appreciate that the CG bamboo doesn't look the best, but I have to say, I wasn't thinking about any of that shit when I was watching this scene. Like, the bamboo forest had been tied into the very beginning of the film. They had driven a Jeep.
And I saw it and I was worried. And I was like, please don't bring this bit. Like, it just, like, it had.
All I'm saying, let me finish.
Yeah, please.
They drove a car through the bamboo forest. Wenwu did, because that was the fastest way to get through the forest without getting swallowed up by the trees.
The gas guzzling villain.
Right. Terrible. Think of the environment, Wenwu. I at no point during the reprisal of this scene think any of the things that you're thinking about. Like, I was fully invested in what was happening inside the car, and they had already set up the stakes of the bamboo forest swallowing up our heroes. So I didn't even think about it on this level. So I'm sorry that it hit you in such like a raw way. But and Brian agrees with me, I think. But like, I don't think everyone's gonna view it that way. And I understand, like, product promotion is a thing, product placement is a thing, especially in these giant franchise movies. But I think there are movies that do it way worse. Like, Transformers is always going to be my lowest bar.
Sonic
right?
the Hedgehog had some insanely
Fucking Olive
blatant
Garden, man.
and
Like,
out of
multiple Olive Garden promotions.
had nothing
in
to
Sonic
do with the
Hedgehog.
plot.
I don't know. I kind of like Olive Garden being a part of Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm not against product placement. I'm not even going to argue against product placement. That is not my argument. It is.
I'm
you're
against
telling
that
me that you
kind of
prefer-
product placement.
You
in
prefer
Sonic
the product
Hedgehog,
placement.
throw all the SpaghettiOs. They're like rings. That's where they really missed out.
So what you're
Like
telling me
Power
right now?
Rangers.
Yeah, the Krispy Kreme in Power Rangers. That's also way
Yeah,
worse.
Rita Repulsa. I mean, the whole point of the movie is to get to a Krispy Kreme. Like,
Right.
Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. It's classic. Listen, it's fine.
But what
That
what
stuff's
the
fine. I don't care.
I just want to make this clear. The conversation we're having right now is you prefer product placement when it's completely blatant, as opposed to when it's kind of sneakily hidden within the narrative of the film, which is how it is in Shang-Chi.
Okay. Sonic the Hedgehog is about a hedgehog from another dimension who wants to find some friends. Okay?
And
Hunted
when
by
you're in Olive
Dr.
Garden, your family.
Hunted by the villain Dr. Robotnik, played by Jim Carrey, who has a large ginger stash. Yeah, throw Olive Garden. They're going to Dunkin' Donuts. I don't give a shit. It's Sonic the fucking Hedgehog. This movie's like ancient Chinese culture and myth. Also, German engineering, baby.
All right.
Is that like
the fact that it took you out of the movie says something, right?
It does,
If you're focusing on this stuff, I agree with Chris that in the moment it didn't take me out of it, and I was kind of caught up in the action and the humor that was there, which I think the character involved there probably plays into this whole thing as well. But
You can say it now, Brian. We're in spoilers.
oh yeah, so Trevor, the former quote unquote Mandarin, who's an actor.
Let's hold Trevor. I want to get James.
No, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Did this scene bother you as much? Probably not as bothered. There's no way it bothered you as much. No one is bothered by this but me. So
it didn't bug me that much. It's just, for me, that scene just didn't hold any weight, right? It's just like, yeah, Trevor is just translating for this Chinese mythical being.
So it is
and he's
about
just
Trevor.
he's just telling Katy, turn left, hard right, another hard right. Now. It's just boring. There's no real tension because you know they're going to get to the other side. So it's like, I don't know if there was like maybe a better way to get them into where they needed to be. It just didn't do anything for me in general.
yeah, and wrapping up kind of this I feel like the character, I like Trevor and the character, so at least that was there for me. I didn't have any tension though. So on that same issue, there's just it didn't feel during the fight scenes, there's a point where I'm like, oh, Awkwafina might die right now. Like, I was just convinced. I was like, this does not look good, and I'm there, and it's tense, and like I felt that tree forest thing. I'm like, we know we're getting there. Just get to the end of this road.
Yeah.
I think it is like the opening scene I was bothered by too. It just was a lot shorter and wasn't like a pivotal. It wasn't like a moment of action. You know, it's the beginning. We're like in this wonder.
And they weren't riding in a 2021 Jeep.
I don't know. It was green Jeep. So he gets to the end, and there's this beautiful, that opens with that beautiful fight scene where we get and I will say that, like, while we're in this, I love the repetition of the forms and the open palms and the close, like, dude, masterful. That's like the stuff of classic movies that's in this movie. But they're doing it on this stage that, like, it's just the mixture of lighting and color palette that I know that they brightened it up. It's a little less bland, that Marvel is getting a little better. Like, so I don't hate the cinematography, but it's examples of this, of like, there's just this sheen over the whole thing that makes it feel so unreal. Like, and it's kind of supposed to, but not in this way. It's a style thing, it's a preference thing, and it takes me out because I know what they're doing. Like, I'm like, oh, it's just like this whole area around is blue screen, and it's not convincing me otherwise. Like, I just know what it looks like, and I see
Right.
it. And there is something to be said about the visual effects and how they we've talked about this on Black Widow, and I think it's a real thing because I've been comparing theaters a little more closely now. It's been a long time since I've been back to theaters. I think it's something about projection theaters that makes this shit look extra bad, which is just a way that it's processed. It's processed on a computer. It's a digital art form.
The higher the resolution, the more apparent the seams are.
Yeah,
that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's because they don't actually care about the theater. And that plays another thing. And I think that's where it gets down to be, where it's like, oh, they actually don't care about this format. And that's how I see it. It's like, oh, it'll look fine on Disney Plus. It'll look great on your phone. And that to me is like where it's a little, I'm very cynical about what Disney actually cares about putting money into. But I will stop there. We wanted to bring up Trevor, and then we'll go into standout moments. Trevor's back, James. When you saw Trevor, were you like, thank God. Wanted to know what's going on with that guy.
Dude, honestly,
before you answer, James, I do have one question for you. Have you seen All Hail the King?
I have.
The Marvel. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Continue.
So it's like, it's because of that, and it's also because of the monologue that Wenwu goes on at the dinner table, which makes Trevor completely unnecessary for this entire film, right? All Hail the King addresses Trevor being the fake Mandarin. And Wenwu, again at the dinner table, explains that he saw what was going on, them trying to make this fake terrorist using his name, and then he took Trevor from the prison and brought him there, right? So it's like we already have this great explanation of why all of that stuff happened in Iron Man 3, and then they just throw him in there, and it just takes me out of the movie. I think as soon as he shows up, the movie comes to a screeching halt, and the film makes Trevor useful only to get to the other side of where we need to go. And after that, he's completely useless. He shows up one more time to play dead. And yes, the gag was pretty funny. There was 2 seconds I was like, oh my God, yes, Trevor is dead. Yes, all hail this movie. And then he's still alive. And it was pretty funny. But when he shows up for the first time, I'm like, this is dumb. And then he re-explains something that we've already been explained to once in this movie, and then a year after Iron Man 3 in All Hail the King. So I just felt like him showing up in the film was just for a gag. I felt it was just like, oh yeah, people in Iron Man 3 didn't like this, so let's bring him in, have him explain everything that happened, and then we'll give him some jokes, we'll make him a part of the film, and we all love Trevor. I don't fucking like him. I never liked Trevor.
I know.
I never liked the idea in Iron Man 3. It's like, it's a cool idea, you know what I mean, to use this name to try to cover up the experiments that they were doing with Extremis, right? It's a cool idea, but the way that they handled the Trevor character, the way that he's such a gag character, just doesn't work for me.
Can you clarify something for me?
Whatsoever. I don't think he's funny.
And possibly for other listeners, which is, if I understand correctly, in the MCU, he takes on his father, Tony Leung's character, Wenwu, takes on the moniker of Mandarin, and he was the one known as the Mandarin, and Ben Kingsley character was a stand-in for him, and that's how they retconned it. But in the comics, the Mandarin is separate from Wenwu, and is a different villain, right?
Wenwu was a character created for this movie specifically.
Right.
They didn't want to flat out call him the Mandarin. That's why they even have that line that Tony Leung delivers at the dinner table that James was talking about, where he goes, they were afraid of an orange. Like, they're kind of poking fun at the name the Mandarin because it was kind of insensitive in the comics. And Kevin Feige and crew wanted to steer as far away as possible from any ties to that character. So they're kind of reinventing him here. And the moniker the Mandarin, specifically, Tony Leung says he's gone by many names and has been given many names over the thousands of years that he's been owner of the 10 rings. So the Mandarin is just kind of like another moniker given to him, not necessarily one that he chose, but more something that Aldrich Killian came up with in Iron Man 3 to create this terrorist.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm really interested. I didn't know it departed so much from the source material, so I'd be curious. We don't have to dive into it on this episode of like what the actual history of.
Yeah, because the 10 rings are completely different than what they are in the comics. In the comics, they crash landed on Earth in an alien spacecraft. The 10 rings are actual rings that hold like the souls of like cosmic beings, right? They all have different abilities.
They still could be based on our bumper, and they could still be rings for a big hand.
yeah, I can't wait to talk about where I think those rings comes from when we get to final thoughts.
Galactus. They're his rings. Huh?
Maybe. Who knows?
Where's
I wasn't...
rings? So, Chris, you didn't mind Trevor?
I can appreciate how James feels about Iron Man 3 and how a lot of people feel about Iron Man 3. That's a very polarizing movie. And I honestly think the character of Trevor Slattery, over the course of his experiences over all of the MCU, really depends on how Iron Man 3 hits you. You know, and if you didn't mind him in Iron Man 3, I don't think you're going to mind him over the course of the film. I personally find Ben Kingsley's performance as Trevor Slattery, and what a clown of a character that he is, to be absolutely hilarious.
It's kind of like
really
if you don't like Don't Stop Believing,
because-
you're not going to like it when your Aunt Karen sings it, you know?
Right? What a weird analogy. But yeah, I think his clownish nature and his ridiculousness is really, it's kind of the Marvel Cinematic Universe poking fun at itself. And I just find it funny. I really liked his back and forth with Morris, this thing that does not really talk, but he translates for. I think it just hits people differently. If you didn't like him to begin with, there's no way you're going to like him at any point in time, you know, because that's just the character that he is. But yeah, it didn't bother me at all. I found it really funny.
We can say that if you don't like the inception point of something in the MCU, you dislike a part of the Marvel Cinematic Uterus. Yeah, I'd have to say, listen.
Where's the harmonica?
Me and James, I think, are friends because we agree on Iron Man 3 so much. Like, we both think it's a bad movie. And I think Ben Kingsley's fine. It's just a weird character in that. And he's a weird character in this, and we agree on the tree scene and why it's not working in the most way, but he's really funny in this movie. I laughed at everything that happened with him. When he's talking about him doing Shakespeare and then he's playing dead. I'm sorry. He's just great. He's great. He's very funny.
Let me say this as well. I don't need to see Trevor Slattery ever again in the MCU. I think this was this was the perfect way to like tie up that thread and just close the door on this character that like a lot of people didn't like, but some people thought was funny, you know? He's an unnecessary character, without a doubt. But I'm glad that he was in this movie considering his close ties with the villain of this movie, you know?
Brian, did you find him funny? I don't good.
I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, I am an Iron Man 3 defender. I feel like it's one of the boldest MCU movies in terms of plot and what they're ultimately saying in that one. So that clearly is biasing my opinion on him coming back here. I will say in terms of comedic relief, I think it comes at a time when Awkwafina's character, who has been really solid comedic relief and is still to some degree in the third act, she is taking on a more serious role, learning how to fight, maybe not doing as much on the comedy side. And Trevor's kind of maybe picking up that slack a little bit. But yeah, no, I totally understand where you guys are coming from on the critiques as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Brian, of where his character actually does fit in, like pace-wise. And I think that's completely valid. And I think it works as far as that goes. And he made me yuck for sure. Very cool. So what are some of our standout moments? Brian, do you mind if we start with you for standout moments? You get two.
Sure.
We're going to do just two.
Okay. So, all right. We've already talked about the train sequence.
Bus sequence.
Excuse me. The bus sequence.
It's really a train of a bus.
It's multiple. Yeah, whatever it is. The bus sequence. So we've talked on that. It's incredible. One of the heights of the MCU, but I really liked the Fight Club sequence and Ronny Chieng's character. He's not in it very much. He ends up showing back up as the right-hand man in the post-credits sequence. But that whole thing, this kind of underground thing that the daughter character, I forget her name.
Xialing.
She obviously comes from this powerful family, is a complete badass in her own right, is going to would obviously have this kind of underground fight club. It felt very John Wicky in terms of this thing that could exist in reality, but is kind of on the edge of this magical realism. Obviously, Wong in Abomination there, the gambling on it. But I thought that whole scene was really solid and some fun world building. And the fact that it starts with showing all the scaffolding on the side of the building, I'm like, I know we're coming back to that scaffolding. It made me think of Rush Hour 2. I think there's a great scaffolding fight scene. But that whole bit I thought was great. Second and final one
scene is classic Chinese cinema.
Yes.
Like it took me back to a lot of Jackie Chan that I've seen.
And it's largely well done. I did think it was a bit silly when Awkwafina's character, Katy, falls and is really dramatically caught. It's like a classic movie thing, a little bit silly, but overall did not take me out of the scene. And even though the end scene, like we mentioned, was really CGI heavy, I thought it was all like the water stuff and the dragon looked really great for the most part.
I agree.
So I really liked all that. I didn't say it in non-spoilers, but I think what really makes this movie work is that the bus sequence starting there and giving us really relatively grounded action works really well and makes things feel like they have weight, even when we get into the more supernatural fight scenes. The punches still have real impact there. And I'm sorry, last one.
Brian, I said 2.
I know this is 3.
I think it's 5. Go ahead.
No. Okay, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
But
go ahead. I can't stop you.
I just want to bring it up. We start with that first scene where Tony Leung meets his wife for the first time, and we get that beautiful 360 of them, like nearly you called it dancing, but it is kind of like a dance back and forth. They're both so clearly respectful of each other's abilities, and coming back to that at the end with the last fight scene where Tony Leung is so desperate to find his wife and ends up kind of seeing something in Shang-Chi that he initially saw in his wife that reminded him of kind of like what he loved about her in the first place, and acknowledged that she's gone, and kind of, made him relove his kid again on some level, which he hadn't been able to do because of the wife. I'm so sorry. That was way too many.
Brian has listed off
this
all
is
the
what
best
I always
scenes in the film.
do. I'm the worst.
Let's just call it there.
Okay, what
sorry.
I got? Let me go through my notes. I got the beef or chicken scene was real funny, eh? Beef or
Oh
chicken.
my god.
Yeah, that was good. That was a pretty good one.
I'm so
That's
sorry.
all I had left. That's why I was like trying to narrow it down, because I think this is a big talking point. But Brian, listen, I'm just the host. I did want to comment on that first scene. It's very also an homage to like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or that. Chris, you would know better than me. What is that style of wuxia? Yeah, and that's didn't you? Is that the term that you use? Or that's a different term for the mythical story?
That's the genre.
That's the genre. So that's
film.
all encompassing that genre. Very cool. Brian, all great stuff. James, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate having you. No, do you have any other standout moments?
Brian literally took the 3 that I was going to pick. I was going to cheat. I was like, so real quick, that opening fight sequence, I like you guys already said, made me instantly feel like I was watching something out of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Definitely like top 5 scenes in the MCU for me personally. I got goosebumps watching that scene. The scaffolding fight, very Jackie Chan, really, really awesome fight choreography, how it was shot on the side of the building. I thought that was really, really cool. And then another thing that I really, really liked, again, like Brian mentioned, that scene at the end where Wenwu gives in to giving Shang-Chi the rings, transferring that power because he sees exactly what what made him fall in love with his wife. That light that she has, he finally sees it within him. He thought it was lost, but it's been there the entire time, and he finally sees that he's wasted all of that time. And then he finally submits and gives Shang-Chi the rings. And it's a moment that's too little, too late. But it crushed me when he died in that scene. Because you can see in his face, it's like, man, I finally come to the acceptance that, you know what, I was a really bad dad. I took the wrong route in doing this. And his character is so good throughout this entire movie, because after his wife dies, it's like, well, now I can go back to the only thing that I've known for the last thousands of years, because my light, my heart is gone. And he takes that out on his kids, and it's really, really hard to watch, watching it play out. So yeah, those are some of my favorite moments. Of course, like you guys already talked about, Abomination versus Wong. I mean, it was awesome.
All very good points. To the father stuff, one of my favorite scenes, because it's like when it gets a little dark, and it's not that it's like gritty or anything, and it's not bloody, but when his father goes to pay the blood price, and just messes those guys up, and you can see it in the mirror at little young Shang-Chi is looking through the glass, and you can see the reflection. All that stuff's really smart. They also do that trick too with the guy on the bus that's recording, where they're so confident that there's enough good action that they're able to play up some of them for like visual perspective stuff, which I always find very fascinating.
Who was in Homecoming, by the way? Shout out to that guy.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, don't know.
Spider-Man do a flip guy.
Yeah.
He's classic, just Gen Zer on a bus. Gen Zer passing by, recording things with his phone like they do. That's how we're really relating to the generation. Chris?
There's really nothing more to say, but I will say this. Listeners of the podcast know what a sucker I am when it comes to like the monomyth and the hero's journey. And I think this film is a perfect example of the hero's journey. I love cyclical storytelling. So when it does come to that final scene and that final fight between Shang-Chi and Wenwu, and like Brian said, they have this beautiful moment where Wenwu looks into Shang-Chi's eyes and he sees his wife. And as both of you already mentioned, and realizes in that moment that, you know, this is still his son and he can hand the rings off to him, and is willing to sacrifice himself for his son, because he does sacrifice himself to save Shang-Chi from that soul sucker. It's just a beautiful moment for that character, Wenwu. And also a beautiful moment for Shang-Chi in fulfilling his true potential as a character, accepting his heritage, this thing that he struggled with for the last 10 years, and the relationship with his father. And Shang in that moment, even you can see in his face, Simu Liu is doing an excellent job, the regret and the lost time that he's had with Wenwu, as you know, his soul is being pulled from his body. It's just a really great moment. And that's why I think this film is one of the better origin stories within the MCU, because it's capable of delivering on that cyclical storytelling, which not all origins in the MCU are.
It also doesn't lean on, although it brings up some MCU stuff, to its credit as an origin story, it doesn't lean on any main, it doesn't feel like it needs to have a main MCU character alongside or a part adjacently. Like I'm thinking Spider-Man, which is like something that you had issue with. So I really appreciate that you didn't bring in Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel, whatever her name is, Captain Marvel, or any of the other MCU characters that maybe they're like, well, let's give them some more screen time and let this be a mentor figure or anything. They let it be an authentically personal story, and I'm sure that was like hard to do. I'm sure that there was many ideas for how they were going to do this that weren't this. This was cool.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add on top of that. And then, of course, the bus sequence at the beginning, it's so Jackie Chan, like Simu Liu taking off his jacket to defend against those guys and then putting the jacket back on. And it's so seamless, and it's just the way Jackie Chan uses his surroundings to fight people in all of his movies, super reminiscent of that. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, no, just that it's, like we were referring it to a dance, which is not a new concept, but it is one to take in mind be very important. The rhythm of it is just perfect, and you get that one moment where he's like, wait for my signal, he goes through, he fights all those dudes, and then everything just cuts, the air gets sucked out of the room, and he just clicks down on the thing. It's
so perfect.
No, that's the beat drops, so to speak. So
and then really, I guess
go ahead,
one last thing I'll say, which is nothing that we've mentioned yet. It's a gag. I really do appreciate the double gag of Shang and Katy explaining an experience in high school at the very beginning to the movie to their friend, and then cutting back to it at the end when they're explaining this like insane mythological adventure that they've just been on. It's such a good joke. And then Katy even
and
referring
the reference
to the thing
to Dragon Ball Z.
You just took the words right out of my mouth.
I'm so sorry.
Katy actually referring to what Shang-Chi does to the dragon at the end. is she calls it a Kamehameha, which means that Dragon Ball Z exists within the MCU and can be referenced. So even in a fictional version of our Earth, Dragon Ball Z has made its way into the pop culture zeitgeist. I love it.
If only we could get Goku in the MCU. And,
I think this movie proves that a Dragon Ball movie can be made.
Oh, absolutely.
If given to the right people.
I don't know.
I mean, there's a Kamehameha wave. There's a dragon that looks like the dragon from Dragon Ball Z. I mean, it's halfway there.
One foot
There's
in the
a
door.
thing about anime adaptations to live action
it's
that I
hard.
just...
It's really hard.
I mean, specifically with anime, right? But, it took some growing pains before comic book movies hit a stride and became kind of all the same. So we can look forward to that, James. They will be the same level of good.
It's a little different. It's a little different with anime because you're pulling from comics and you're making stories based on these stories that you've already seen. But with anime, there's certain ways that they play up like jokes and like expressions and stuff that make anime what it is that just doesn't translate to live action. So when they try to do
there's a cultural language in the animation.
We've hit it though.
That
We've
is hard to
been there.
translate.
Speed Racer, I'd argue, is like one of the best anime.
I'll give you that.
Live action.
I'll give you
that. So I think that you can capture the tone. It's possible. It is just not popular, and it's probably
Right.
as expensive as you write. But Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, that's a very anime movie. Noted, they aren't specifically very popular manga anime stuff in the spirit of the things you're looking for, but I would say that is probably where the direction should go to capture that vibe that you're looking for.
Can I bring up, Christian? Do you have some more scenes? 'Cause I have one last favorite moment I want to shout out before we move on.
I'm gonna see if you dry up the whole well. Go ahead, bud.
No, go for it. Go for it.
No. I leave it to you.
No, please.
I insist.
I
The
know you had
camera
talked
is
about
now
some.
on
I
you.
didn't know. No, go for it, please. I'm not going to steal it. Are you just waiting now?
Go ahead.
Oh
Great
my
podcasting.
gosh. Okay. So it was a gag at the very end, last post-credit scene.
God damn it, Brian!
No, why? I told you.
Joking.
I feel so horrible.
No, I'm just
but yeah, coming back to the karaoke, I thought was really hilarious. The movie was like, is this really going to end on a super serious note? And then cutting to the karaoke was just the perfect breath of fresh air to wrap it up.
Not only that, it's a double joke because it is going
Yes.
back to the Hotel California joke, which is also
That's right.
my
Art of
fiance.
confusion.
My fiance lost her shit when when she started doing that. And speaking of which, my fiance really enjoyed the whole movie, and she does not love all the MCU movies. She's really just like the superhero stuff. And this one's out there, right? But I just think the vibe of it's so good. And it is such a great movie. It's very digestible. But she was kind of like, she looked at me as we were going, and she was the type of person that said, is this all going to be, she gave me a look that was, I read it, and I was like, no, she gave me a look that was, is this all going to be in Chinese? Of like, and it's not, I don't think it's like a thing of like, oh, I'm offended by it. It's my fiance doesn't see very well, but refuses to wear glasses, and so it's hard for her to actually read the text. And I'm like, this is an easy solve, my love. But yeah, I think she was French because she was like, I could see her like up and like looking at the screen. I was like, very funny. Let's see, is there anything left? Mentioning like the connective tissue, I love all the moments where it slows down, and I do like all the family stuff. It is a little bloated, but I think it's mostly working. I love the smart cutbacks. That final fight scene has some of that too, and I really love that origin story. It's a very classic tale. It's very straightforward, but I was actively engaged every time we were getting a little bit more of the history, and I love the way it was cut. It didn't seem like, sometimes it can seem like, oh, this kind of had to be re-edited for pacing, and it didn't feel that way. It felt like this was the idea for how you were going to tell the story because it was so thematic and so secular, like you were saying. So I just really appreciate all that connective tissue of the history and it opens so well with how giddy it is at the beginning. Starts off beautiful. It goes into kind of rom-com territory, like goofy best friend territory, then goes into the most badass hand-to-hand fight sequence, and then goes into like horrific what's the word? Like when you like desensitization and like horrific things that you would do to children, and to connect all of that seamlessly in a great way. That is not easy. That's masterclass filmmaking because it's hitting all of those. I feel all those moments, they're working, and somehow they're working together. And I think that is like the upside of what the development and production team of the MCU and the greater Kevin Feige verse is able to cultivate that talent, right, and get them in the right place. So really appreciate all that. Don't appreciate CG bamboo. Could do without CG bamboo in my life. And I'm interested to watch it on digital, because every time I complain about this stuff, I watch it on digital on my TV, and I'm always like, yeah, it looks a little cleaner. Yeah,
we said when or I think I said when I watched Black Widow on Disney Plus on my computer screen, I was like, I didn't notice any of the problems we had when we saw it in Dolby, because the resolution was lower, so yeah, I'm interested as well to watch this digitally or streaming.
Like I said,
that bamboo
good.
That bamboo is particularly bad, considering we get great bamboo in one of the training scenes of, why do I keep forgetting the sister's name? Xialing is using her weapon and slices up all of these actual bamboo rods. And those are so physically there. And like, I don't know if it's actually CG, but it looks so real compared to that forest, Christian. It doesn't help it.
Sure. And what I'm going to close on, just one more minor nitpick. I don't love, you're having trouble remembering her name. And I think that's because she's not a great character. I think she's probably the weakest element. Some of it feels like there's like this girl boss energy that's kind of shoved in there, where I don't think they take the time to really develop that character. And then showing her turn, like there is an arc there that's very interesting. So, the son finds closure. The sister is still has a grudge, right?
This seems to be the conflict going forward, right? Because he thinks that she's dismantling the organization. She's actually took on the mantle.
Right. And there's an arc there. The movie feels like it's not serving that, and it doesn't show enough tension, because I think I honestly think it's afraid to make her too unlikable. Like I really think that was kind of where they were at, in like kind of planning this out. And I wish it had a little more gusto to like be like, no, let's show the cracks early, and like actually let's worry about her. And you never have that. You're just kind of like, yeah, she's like a girl boss, and at the end she's like, yeah, I am a girl boss, and I'm evil. Like, whoa.
I'm okay with it, because I know it's all going to be filled in later, right? Like this is just this is Shang-Chi issue 1, and we just have to wait for issue 2, 3 to just get more of that story. Like the MCU should be viewed like a comic book series. Like you're not going to get everything in one issue. That's why there's a whole run, right? Once you get the full story, then you'll get everything that you're looking for. And if you don't, then yeah, that's cool.
But if you're telling a story, I mean, my issue is that, and it's like, it's part of the MCU stinger thing, which is like within this epic, you could have still, they give her screen time. They could have shown us at least where that was going, and maybe added the stinger or not had the stinger. I just think adding the stinger puts her character so far ahead of what the movie worked for that it's frustrating, That's just
so instead of just bitching about Trevor, here's what I would do. I would give everything that Trevor does in the film to Xialing.
Sure.
Right? Because she's the one
through
exactly. She's the one still there, right? Like she was always ignored by Wenwu. She could have wanted to find her mother's homeworld, to visit her family members, to visit that other side of her family that she never knew. And she found the path, right? She found this mythical creature to take her on the path. Instead of bringing Trevor into the film, which I think, again, kind of just slows it down just a little bit, when you could have given that to Xialing. It would have given her more character development, because it shows instantly that she's been on journeys trying to discover the other part of her when she was being shunned by her own father, right? I think that would have been good for the character, but...
No, I agree with that.
I just thought, like, just the ending of it, of her, like, taking over the compound and then using it to make her own, like... Again, product placement. She makes her own branded chocolate beverage, and it's just like upsetting,
Is this what is
Yeah, she names it after her father, and of course the product placement, Wenwu's Yoo-hoo.
Oh my god! Wow.
Can I talk about one other nitpick that I have with the film and just the MCU in general? There's moments in MCU films where there should be high moments of tension, and I should feel the weight of characters dying, and I should feel the dread that a lot of other people are going to die. And then there's moments where they throw in humor that just doesn't work at all, right? So I should feel these moments when people's souls are being ripped out, when
Right.
the archer teacher, I can't remember his name right now, but when his soul gets ripped out, I felt that. But everyone else, it's just shrouded in like, oh, let's throw in a joke here. It's like, oh, someone just got their soul ripped out, but let's cut to Trevor real quick and just have a quick gag of him playing dead. Like, I hate it when the MCU does this. Like, one of the biggest issues is like Age of Ultron. There's people dying. There's large pieces of rock falling on people, like down on the city. The hundreds to thousands of people are dying. Thor, Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Widow, they're all throwing out gags and quips and shit. I'm like, dude, people are dying. This
Why
is
do
a
you
really
think they were
serious
so
situation.
pissed and they signed the Sokovia Accords? Like,
Right.
like, Baron Zemo was like, and you guys wouldn't shut the fuck up. You were joking the whole time. You guys are psychopaths. You're psychopaths. He was right. Baron Zemo.
It genuinely bugs me, but it's an MCU thing. Like,
So would you
people's
say the
souls
humor
are being ripped out?
So you'd
like,
say the humor during that scene was a little soulless.
yes.
Oh boy. Oh,
Incredible.
boy.
Yes.
James, I agree with you. I think the worst offender is in Thor Ragnarok at the very end when Asgard explodes and Korg makes a joke about it. I love Korg as a character, and he's very funny over the course of that whole movie.
Can't take it too seriously.
But I think that one joke was unnecessary. You know, they could have left it as this impactful moment. Thor's just lost his home. You know,
I'll
and all these
defend it a little
Asgardians have
bit
just lost their
because they're so jokey. They really are just a full 4-quadrant film. And I do think in this context, this movie could have been an epic and didn't have to be so jokey, but it's an MCU movie, right? But to its credit, you know, children go to see these movies. And I think part of the justification that I would have is like, it's a reminder of like, hey, this is a cartoon movie. I'm a talking rock. You know, like, I think there's a little bit of that the
But
MCU
there
wants
should
to play.
still be consequences.
I
Even in
agree.
the comics, they show you these consequences and they don't shy around it with jokes.
Yeah.
You know
That's
what I mean?
No, that's true. Very good point. Couldn't agree more. To that scene, I do want to say the Soul Eater stuff. I'm talking about bad CG. I'm talking about good CG when they're trying to cut it with their weapons and it keeps like reforming.
Yeah, that was sick.
It's tight. It's good stuff. There's great VFX happening. Dragon looks sick as fuck. All looks great.
Yeah, Death Dealer looks really cool in the film. Doesn't really do anything, and then he gets his soul ripped out.
Yep. He's another
Razor
character.
Fist, you only know his name because his name is written on the side of the Jeep. It's like,
I think he should have
Throwaway
I think he
characters.
should have fully deep throated that dragon. Raise the stakes. Any final thoughts on Shang-Chi? Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi.
Brian, you first.
Please, Brian.
I highly recommend this one. I think in terms of solo origin movies, there are a lot of them, and a lot of them are solid in the MCU. But I'd say this one is safely in the upper half for me. In terms of, I just made a list. I think incredible. We got Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America: First Avenger, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and Black Widow. So 10 movies. This is the 11th, I think, solo origin story. And yeah, it's hard for me to put it in terms in like, I don't think it's in the top 3 for me personally, but it's up there. I'd say top 5.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, especially narrowing it down to those solo movies because that's where they've
I
struggled.
think that's kind of
most.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely put it upper tier. Definitely top 5. Top 5 easy. I didn't write a list, but if I did have a list, I think it's not being pushed out by much. James, final thoughts.
Yeah, for me, like I said in my my non-spoiler thoughts, I love the cinematography, love the fight sequences, love the performances. Wenwu, I think, is a great antagonist. I love the depth to his character. Again, I love the friendship between Katy and Shang-Chi. I feel like that's a really, really strong friendship that will blossom into other things that we'll see in future movies. I already mentioned the things that just kind of bugged me. It felt like when Trevor came in, not just because of him, but the film kind of slows down. Like Brian said earlier on, the first like hour is just so solid, and then once you get to a certain point, it just kind of slows down just a little bit, and then it picks back up again. So I really, really love this movie. I highly recommend it. I'll be seeing it in theaters again, at least 2 more times. I already have tickets to see 2 more times, and then can't wait to see it on streaming. Absolutely love it. In terms of solo films, definitely up there, like top 4 solo films for me. In terms of all around MCU, I actually ranked it already, and we'll see where it goes when I rewatch it. But as of right now, it's out of the 28 things in the MCU right now, not counting What If, it's about number 19 for me. Which is not, it's not a bad thing because there's just so many great things in the MCU, but it's just around number 19. I have it right under Homecoming and Doctor Strange.
No, I think that's pretty fair. I would just leagues above Doctor Strange in my opinion. Like, they're not even close, so I would probably rank it higher in my opinion. Like, it's, to me, it's no contest.
The emotional stuff they're asking for us to do in Doctor Strange is just not working at all in the level that this one does for me personally, but there's definitely great stuff in that movie.
Sure, I think there's stuff working. I don't think it's as complete of a picture as this. This is really, again, in my final thoughts, I really do think it was 5% away from being one of the best things in the MCU. It just you had to go and drive that EV through a bamboo forest for no reason. Chris?
I think if you can go to a theater safely, this is a movie that is absolutely worth seeing in theaters. The visual experience you'll have seeing this in theaters is going to be so much better than just watching it on your TV or watching it on your phone or your tablet or something at home. So if you have a theater near you and you can see it safely, highly, highly recommend doing so. In terms of how this falls in the MCU, since you guys have ranked kind of where it stands for you, I recently posted on Twitter my complete ranking of all the MCU films. And for all of them, all 28, that's, live action shows included, this comes in number 10 for me. I really, really enjoyed this movie.
Holy cow.
If we're doing what Brian did in terms of solo movies, this is my 3rd favorite solo movie after Captain America and Iron Man. So
wow,
I really enjoyed
that's
that movie.
high
If
praise.
it's solo movie, like I'm trying, I don't want to like misspeak or.
I just looked at my
misinterpret
top 10 MCU movies, and the only solo movies that I have in my top 10 are Captain America, Iron Man, and Shang-Chi. So
I think it's
The only solo film I have in my top 10 is Black Panther.
I think it's easy for me. I think it's Iron Man, Shang-Chi, and Black Panther. Like I think
And Iron Man too. Why did I say just Black Panther?
yeah, I think those 3 movies are Iron Man because of its just uniqueness and special, and it kind of it was the formula, and it kind of it wrote the book on it, right? And kind of a lot of these movies, I feel like Shang-Chi is less it feels like more of a departure. It feels like a next step towards something else. But really, it's that historical aspect of it. I'm not sure if Iron Man came out tomorrow, we'd probably be like, oh, it's such another MCU movie because it is. Everything seemed to have just kind of copycatted that and replicated it. But it's such a special movie. But I think those are the 3 movies for me, solo wise, for sure. So I don't think that's bold at all, Chris. I think that's a great placement.
thanks, bro.
Hey, we should start a podcast one day, and if we do, we'd name it Pop-O-Holics. James, thank you so much.
Can I be a co-host on that one?
Oh.
I mean, at this point, you've been on so many episodes, you're kind of an honorary co-host anyway. So
For
I
sure.
will take it.
What if I just give you my co-host and I'll just talk into a mic by myself? That's no one wants me.
No.
James, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come visit us. We love talking MC movies with you. Where can people find more of you on the internet?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for allowing me to be here. Love talking movies with you guys. And you guys can follow me all over social media at JB Exclusive. You want to find everything that I do, go to carefulforspoilers.com. You will find links to our merch store, to the Patreon, where we have a bunch of exclusive content. And you will find links to all of the podcasts on the C4S Podcast Network. We also write articles on movie news. We do movie reviews on there as well, anime reviews, gaming reviews, yeah, everything. Anime, you name it, we do it.
You name it, James is talking about it. Yes, and they are, I say this every time you're on, but I just want to reiterate too, if we have any new listeners today, James, I think as far as deep nerd dives into like the origins of all this stuff, like you don't find it better or more clear or more accurate on the internet. I learn something every time this man is on a podcast. Every time I go on the show, I feel like, what am I doing here? I'm a jackass. I'm just a jackass with a microphone. You actually give a lot of context for stuff. I love your material. Everybody should check it out. If you're a fan, you want to know, especially if you don't know a lot about the comic books, you learn so much about where it came from, get you excited about the source material. All that stuff's amazing. Can't recommend it highly
Thanks,
enough.
bro.
No problem. I'm done saying nice things though. And your podcast is better than mine. What? Anyway, Chris Bryan, where can people find more of your stuff on the internet?
Loyal viewers and listeners, you can find me on Twitter at Chris Conkling, talking about all things nerdy, comic books, television, movies, video games, collectibles. If it's nerdy, I'm talking about it.
If it's nerdy, Chris is talking about it.
Yep. Brian, where can people find you?
You can find me
I'll
at
be
True.
guzzling all the good parts down. You got a good part to talk about. I'll be just a chugging away. Sorry, Brian.
I lost track of the gag, but you can find me at True Pop-O-Holic. If it's daddy, I'm joking about it.
Oh my God.
I had to.
Perfect.
I had to.
Perfect.
And now Brian's funnier than me. What the fuck happened? Chris
Hashtag Shang-Chi.
Chris has become a better host. Brian's funnier than me. I'm just gonna do that Homer Simpson tree meme out of here.
This is a rare occurrence, Christian.
Christian, I just have to say,
I'm sorry,
if
Brian.
it's daddy,
You've been on.
I'm joking about it, is now on the soundboard. It has to be.
That's fair.
Brian has been on fire for the last 3 weeks, and whatever you're having, I'll have a double. You know what I mean? Very, very good. You can find my musical musings at Midnight Satire. This Friday, there's new music out finally, so check that out. It's going to be streaming everywhere. Follow so you can see the latest release. So excited to be finally coming out with stuff. That'll do it for this episode. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, Pop-O-Holicscast@gmail.com. Link in the description below. If you have any suggestions for themed months, suggestions for guests, any feedback, you want to weigh in on who's funnier, who has the butter mustache? Yeah, who has the butter mustache on the show? I don't know. You know. I've never wanted prop butter more in my life. If it's butter, I'm talking about it.